Hey there, self-care warriors. So this is part 2 of Narcissists and Psychopaths Online. So I actually had a viewer of the first part of my series, which focused more on my personal experience with cyberbullying and narcissistic rage, message me, and she requested that I do a part 2, but focusing more so on narcissistic exes and the ways that these predators appear online. So I decided I'm going to do a part 2. And I wanted to start out by connecting it back to some of the videos that I've made earlier on, which were about diversion tactics that narcissists use. And I actually mentioned a lot about cyberbullying and trolling in that video, so if you haven't watched Narcissists Use Diversion Tactics to Silence You, please do. That is a series with, I think, 3 videos, and it'll be very helpful to frame some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this video as well. So, of course, the first sign of any narcissist or psychopath or sociopath online is that they are trolling. So trolling is a huge sign that they might be a narcissistic, toxic person. Some people, maybe a minority of people, might just troll for fun if they're young or they're mindless and it's a thoughtless activity and they're not really thinking about who it's going to hurt. But I find that the trolls online tend to be older people who should know better, but they have that mentality of a 5-year-old where they find it fun to humiliate, shame, and silence people online. And so they spend their lives trolling various platforms, and they tend to follow a lot of different platforms. Sometimes they do stick to just one, and they'll find every single article that they can troll. They'll find everything they can in order to undermine you and make sure that they basically distract and detract from your main argument, because of course, as I said before, narcissists love to maintain the status quo. So if you are challenging the status quo in any way, they are sure to troll you, and they're sure to come around and regurgitate nonsense and try to make your argument seem absurd by regurgitating it in a way that is excessive and absurd. And they will often have multiple accounts to support each other, so they will often have anonymous multiple accounts where they can use to triangulate each other and triangulate themselves with support. So you start to think that, oh, these trolls actually have support, but it's actually them that are doing all of this trolling. It's just one person usually. Sometimes trolls travel in packs, so sometimes you'll have a couple of different trolls that with the same agenda and they support each other. For example, on a platform that I was writing for, there was a couple of different trolls, a few different trolls, like about 3 or 4, who followed each other. They would actually follow each other on comments. There was a platform where you can basically follow people's comments, and these specific trolls followed each other on their platforms. And it's so interesting how they would actually track what the other one was saying and then jump into the argument in order to show support for their fellow troll. And so some of these trolls do travel in packs, and others have fake accounts to show support for each other and basically triangulate the victim, the target, whoever they're trolling, with this other troll or this other account that shows them this fake support. So again, their diversion tactics mainly revolve around insulting your intelligence, staging personal attacks instead of focusing on the main argument, and undermining you in any way that they possibly can. Another sign, a huge sign I think of narcissists in general, but also online, is that they show an excessive amount of contempt for other people who disagree with them or challenge them in some way that threatens their sense of superiority and entitlement. So their overall attitude towards people who threaten their superiority tends to be contempt. I would recommend checking out Deb's channel, Finally Free from Narcissism. She has an excellent video on the differences between constructive criticism and destructive criticism, the type of criticism that's meant to undermine you. And she talks a lot about how we as scapegoats can be sensitive to criticism, but at the same time, we should not be taking any crap from people who are basically out to criticize and nitpick and do anything possible to basically scapegoat us again and re-traumatize us. So I encourage you to check that video out. I'll try to put a link or annotation in this video as well. But if you notice that there's someone whether it's in the narcissistic abuse community or just in general online in a different platform, whether it's on YouTube or another platform, that they have a sort of contempt and excessive rage towards anyone who disagrees with their point of view or basically doesn't subscribe to their ideology, then maybe just be a little bit more wary of them, because that type of contempt can be coming from either a place of trauma, or usually with trolls, it's coming from a place of entitlement. So the way to differentiate between the two is take into account the context in which they're speaking and try to see whether their contempt is coming from a viewpoint that might have valid points or some sort of legitimacy, or is it coming from an overreaction to really irrelevant things that unnecessarily angers them, unnecessarily provokes them. I want to provide an example without getting too specific. I did see a video that had a lot of contempt for a certain way of making a YouTube video. And when I saw that video, I thought it was very excessive. I thought it was unnecessarily angry and rageful. And I thought it was unnecessary in general. I think there's a way to be constructive and still be gentle and still be compassionate and empathic without being contemptuous, without having that contempt and excessive rage, because that excessive rage just makes you look like the narcissist. So it's very, very important to be mindful of the way that you are approaching others, and I'm not talking about being angry at injustice or being angry at someone who's abusing you or harassing you online, because we all know that there is no such thing as mutual abuse, or rarely is there such thing as mutual abuse. Usually it's someone who's attacking you first, and then if you happen to react, that might get mischaracterized as abuse. But what's often happening is that there was that main abuser who was provoking you little by little with, that death by 1,000 cuts phenomenon. And it's really important that we take that into account when we look at these types of reactions and contempt. The second thing that I would recommend looking out for is, are they stalkers? So if you've ever had a narcissistic ex stalk you online, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I did that video on narcissists and long distance or long-term relationships, I mentioned a social worker that I had dated who actually ended up stalking me online afterwards, after like about 2 years of maybe 2 or 1.5 years of no contact. And this was the same person whose ex-girlfriend I had actually met by accident, by complete fate. I mean, God works in mysterious ways, and we met up, and she accidentally met me, and we just happened to meet at a train station, and I had no idea who she was. She knew who I was from social media, and she told me and confided in me that he had been harassing her, stalking her, and that he had treated her horribly. He had abused her. She had to actually call the police on him at one point. And he was actually a licensed social worker. I don't know if he still has his license, but basically he also stalked me online 2 years after I had ended the relationship. And that is a sign, a major sign, that there's something toxic going on beneath the surface. If someone is stalking you and harassing you online, as I talked about in my previous video in the part 1 of this series, I had many cyberbullies who would follow me onto personal social media accounts just to stalk and harass me when I did not give them any supply. So remember, trolls want supply. If they're narcissistic, they definitely rely on that supply for that sick sense of sadistic excitement that they get whenever they get a reaction. So if you find someone who's relentlessly stalking you, harassing you, or even hoovering you after the end of a relationship, or if they're insulting you in some way, it's because they have that sense of entitlement and that need for control and power. And if you take that away from them, and if you say that I'm not going to respond to you in the way that you expect me to, and I'm not going to feed into your falsehoods, and I'm not going to validate your existence in any way, that's when they become narcissistically injured and rageful. So these types of people online tend to be very, very vicious. Even if you've never met them in real life, and they're just a regular cyberbully troll and not your narcissistic ex, they can still become very vicious when it comes to online stalking. Narcissistic exes in general will stalk your Facebook page, any other platform that they're aware of. I remember that same licensed social worker actually was stalking on my Facebook page, even though I'd blocked him, and he would do so with a fake account, and I knew that it was him because he stupidly used the same name, and I would see him come up on people you may know, and that's usually a list that comes up because that person has been checking your profile, and I had never had any interaction with this other fake account, so I knew that it was him, and that he had been looking at my account through this fake account because I had blocked his original account. These are some of the insidious ways that they'll try to slither in and try to take control of your life again, and try to stalk and harass you, keep up to date on your whereabouts and who you might be hanging out with and what you might be doing. And this is a classic way that narcissistic exes will hoover and maneuver back into your life. But cyberbullies and trolls who you've never met may also harass and stalk you. They might try to look at the content that you're putting out and try to nitpick at it. They might leave insulting comments. They will follow you through these different types of platforms, and they will try to get personal information on you. So it's really important that you limit the amount of personal information that you make to the public, because these types of trolls and cyberbullies are not just your narcissistic exes. They can also be just sadistic psychopaths who make a living, basically. And I don't mean make a living as in they're getting paid to troll, but oh my goodness, they should, because they're doing it as a 24/7 job. Jesus Christ. But they are doing it to an excessive extent where they are basically stalking that individual mercilessly, and they don't have any limits when it comes to that. Another sign that they might be a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath online is that they have a huge harem where they gain supply from. And that harem tends to consist of members that act as flying monkeys should the narcissist's power ever be threatened. So they tend to have a harem of yes men. So we do have people who are doing amazing work in this niche, and we have people in general who are very popular and famous, who have a great following, and it's not because they're yes men, it's because these followers are genuine and the person that they're following are genuine. I'm not talking about that instance. I'm talking about people who have a following because they want supply from their following. So when we think about the case of Sam Pepper, and if you're not familiar with the YouTube star Sam Pepper, he did a number of pranks and they were later discovered to be probably real, where he would sexually harass women on the streets and basically get views and monetize that content. And then later on there were several reports from multiple women of sexual assault and harassment outside of the pranks. And he had a number of fans, a lot of fans, I should say, who would go on the videos of the women who were talking about their sexual assault, and they would bully that woman. And they would use so many horrible names, and they would insult them and degrade them so horrifically. And they would speak with such contempt. It was unbelievable how faithful these harem members were and how loyal they were to this person they had never met. And that's something to watch out for online, because if you have someone who's very popular, well-known, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're exempt from their own signs of narcissism. In the first part of my video, you learned that I encountered someone who was very public, who nobody would ever suspect would be a narcissist. And I found out that they had also bullied other people. So it's really important to stay mindful of the fact that if a person has a harem that bullies other people, that means that they have no problem with bullying in general. If they're not standing up to their harem members bullying others, then that means that they're basically approving of the fact that these flying monkeys are supporting them by tearing down these other people. And when we have something like a larger crime like rape and assault, and you have harem members that are running around bullying others because their narcissistic king or queen has done something wrong, and they refuse to accept the reality of that person, then you might be a little bit wary about whether or not this person is legitimate, whether or not this person is authentic. And it's important to just stay mindful of anyone who has a harem of yes men or yes women who will defend their right to perpetrate acts of injustice or violence against other people. Another sign is love bombing. So if you have someone who's excessively love bombing you, and I'm not talking about maybe you have a following of people who really genuinely love your work and resonate with your work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who excessively fixate on you, excessively love bomb you to the point where they're fetishizing you or idealizing you, and they're putting you on this pedestal, and at the same time they might be devaluing others, or they might be treating other people with contempt. That is a sure red flag, because they might use that love bombing in order to triangulate you later. So it's really important that you stay mindful of the fact that there are predators out there who are not necessarily genuinely interested in you and your work. They might just be interested in your support of their misbehavior. And that brings me to my fifth point, which is, again, triangulation. If they're using multiple accounts to triangulate themselves and show support for themselves, then you can be sure that this is a red flag of a toxic narcissist. Because rather than depending on the legitimacy of their perspective or providing valid points for their perspective, they're constantly relying on others to validate their point of view and the way that they've reacted, or perhaps even the ways that they've bullied people. And this triangulation can be real or imaginary, as I talked about with the fake accounts triangulating each other, or they might travel in packs, so there might be a pack of trolls that are triangulating each other, supporting each other. But another way that triangulation can take place, and I spoke about this in my video about female narcissists and friendships, is that online narcissists and trolls and psychopaths and sociopaths may actually pit two people against each other and spread misinformation to these two people, so that these two people end up attacking or hating each other instead of the narcissist or sociopath or psychopath. So they might tell Sally that hey, Elaine doesn't really like you, and they might tell Elaine, hey, Sally doesn't really like you. And that's a simplified version, of course, of how this works. But basically they're spreading this type of misinformation so that nobody knows anything about what's happening. And by confusing everyone and putting up smoke and mirrors, they are able to justify their abuse and get away with their abuse even more quickly, because nobody knows the reality of what's happening, and everyone thinks that everyone else is out to get each other, when in fact there's that one bully that's creating all of this chaos. So be very mindful of someone who comes to you regarding something that someone else has said, and just remember, what is their investment? What is their agenda in this? Are they trying to convince me of something, or are they just being a supportive friend and trying to warn me about something? Because sometimes that can be part of a larger smear campaign. And yes, smear campaigns can take place online as well as offline in real life. So that actually connects to my next sign, which is public humiliation and shaming. So these types of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths want to publicly humiliate the people that threaten their ideologies, that threaten their sense of superiority and entitlement. So rather than just leaving them alone and simply Xing out of whatever they dislike or don't agree with, or simply leaving maybe a comment of constructive criticism that's still gentle and compassionate, they choose, again, to harass, stalk the people that threaten their sense of control and power. And in order to regain that power, they want to humiliate, they want to shame, they want to silence, they want to abuse, they want to mistreat the person that threatens that sense of superiority. And so if you see someone who's publicly shaming someone, not because they are trying to expose them as a bully, but because they didn't agree with something that they said, just be very mindful, because people who don't have that excessive contempt and rage are able to approach those arguments in a more mindful manner, and they're able to disagree without being that disrespectful. So if you see a lack of respect where it's unwarranted, be very cautious of that. Another thing is that they might have trouble with the law. They might engage in criminal acts, as we talked about the Sam Pepper case and sexual assault. They are very deviant and perverse, so they will go to any lengths possible in order to not only harass and stalk people, but they might also engage in other acts in real life that correspond to their behavior online. So I mentioned a wonderful advocate that I know who took her cyberbully to court, and it ended up being that the cyberbully was actually also abusing other people in his real life, in his real day-to-day life. So not only was he engaging in this type of misogynistic trolling against women, he was also treating the women in his real life in a very unsavory manner, to say the least. I mean, that is the most sugar-coated way that I can possibly put it. But if they're engaging in hacking, if they're engaging in criminal acts online, they're probably engaging in diverse deviant behaviors offline as well. Not always, though, because sometimes these sociopaths and psychopaths and narcissists don't have enough supply offline and real life, and so that's why they have to have all of these different platforms where they can pretend to be king or queen. I actually saw a troll who would make such grandiose statements about himself or herself, and I have no idea if they are a match to anything in reality. I really highly doubt it, honestly. And in terms of the language that they speak, like narcissists in real life, online narcissists engage in circular arguments, word salad, overgeneralizations. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, they will try to regurgitate your argument in a way that seems absurd, that seems excessive, and they will try to attack your personal character and your integrity and your credibility instead of attacking the actual argument that you're making, because they have an agenda to maintain that status quo, and if anything challenges that status quo, that they won't benefit from it. So they don't want anybody speaking out against their falsehoods. Another sign is pathological lying. So in a world where online dating is becoming the norm, this is something to watch out for, because people can hide who they really are online. So they might, if you are on an online dating site, you might find people are lying about their jobs, what they do for a living, their hobbies, their interests. They might mirror you, they might love bomb you. They might lie about their appearance, even their marital status. You know, there's just all sorts of schemes that can happen online. So always be very cautious and wary. And try to understand that the person who presents themselves online can present themselves in a way that is very different from who they are in real life. That is the end of my list for now. I'm sure there are many more that I'll discuss in future videos. I did want to bring up these signs because I think they're great to look out for in the narcissistic abuse survivor community themselves. If you haven't checked out Annabelle Lee's video on cyberbullying in the community, please do so. I'll leave a link in the description below. Check out Deb's video on constructive criticism versus personal attacks. I'll leave a link in the description below to that as well. And Begotten Sprout actually made a very cool video about how you can add moderators to your channel to, I believe, remove comments or at least filter them. And if anybody wants me to serve as their moderator for their channel, just let me know. I'll be happy to do that. And I just want to contribute to going against cyberbullying and trolling in this community, and I want to make sure that survivors have a safe space to speak out and navigate different channels without being harassed and stalked and trolled. And I hope that that helps. And let me know in the comment section below, what did you find helpful about this video? Did you resonate with anything in this video? And let me know if there's any signs that I missed about online narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths. I'll talk to you guys very soon, and until then, take care.